My name is Anna Clark. I'm 26, and last week, I watched my family tear down everything I'd built for their approval. We were sitting at the dining table in our quiet Chicago home, the same table where I'd spent years listening to my mother praise my brother like he was the second coming of genius. Only this time, her smile was gone. Her jaw was tight. Her tone clipped like a verdict. "Give up your room," she said coldly, "or you're out of this family." For a second, I couldn't breathe. My room, my space, was the only corner of that house that was mine. It wasn't just four walls. It was where I'd spent endless nights sketching app designs, coding prototypes, and dreaming about a life beyond their control. I glanced around the table. My father sat silent, fiddling with his napkin. My sister Andrea leaned back, arms folded, the smug tilt of her head saying everything her lips didn't have to. And my brother Gregory, their golden child, the gamer they worshipped, just smirked. That's when I realized this wasn't a discussion. It was an ambush. Mom's voice sharpened. "Gregory needs the room for his studio setup. Sponsors expect better quality. We've already decided." Dad tried to speak, but one glare from her shut him down. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could have fought back, listed every sacrifice they'd ignored. How I paid for my own education, how I built my career from nothing, how I'd never asked them for a cent. But deep down, I knew words wouldn't matter. They'd already chosen who deserved everything. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood like a warning bell. "If that's your choice," I said quietly, "then you've just made mine." Andrea scoffed. "Always so dramatic." Gregory laughed under his breath, confident I'd cave like always. But I didn't. I walked away, through the hallway, past the photos of their perfect son, into the cold air outside, my hands shaking, but my resolve sharper than it had ever been. They thought they'd won. They thought the quiet daughter would back down one more time. But what they didn't know was that I'd spent years preparing for this moment, building something they couldn't touch, something they'd never see coming. They believed they'd kicked me out of my future, but soon I'd show them. I was the one holding the keys to theirs. To understand how I reached that breaking point, you have to know what life was like inside our so-called perfect suburban home. We lived on the quiet edge of Chicago, a neighborhood of identical houses and polite smiles. The kind of place where every driveway looked the same, and every secret stayed hidden behind freshly painted fences. From the outside, we were the model family, but inside, everything revolved around one person, Gregory. Mom called him a prodigy. My sister Andrea called him the star. To me, he was just the boy who took everything I ever worked for, and never once said thank you. When Mom came home from her job at the bank, she'd walk through the door with shopping bags filled with gaming gear. "New controller, Greg," she'd say like it was Christmas morning. Andrea would giggle and film him unboxing it for his followers. Dad, the history teacher, would just sigh. Too kind to fight, too tired to stop it. I was the ghost in the room, the quiet one, the girl who spent her evenings with a library book instead of a joystick. It wasn't always that way. Dad used to notice me, slipping me notes that said, "Keep learning. You'll go far." But in our house, Mom's voice ruled everything, and she made it clear that Greg's dream mattered more than mine. When I was 13, I'd saved $500, working weekends at the grocery store. Money for a used laptop, so I could finally learn coding properly. The night before I planned to buy it, Gregory burst into the kitchen, begging for a new graphics card. Without hesitation, Mom found my jar and emptied it. "This is for the family's future," she said. Andrea nodded. Dad tried to speak, but one look from her silenced him. That night, while they all crowded around Greg's glowing monitor, celebrating his victory, I sat alone at our old desktop computer. Its fan whined, its screen flickered, but it worked just enough for me to type my first real lines of code. I wasn't crying. I was building. From that night on, something inside me changed. Their approval no longer mattered. I didn't need their applause. I needed results. While they chased trophies made of plastic, I was learning how to build something that could never be taken from me again. Every line of code became a brick in my escape. Every night I stayed up late was another quiet rebellion against the family that refused to see me. They thought they'd buried my future under their favoritism. But I was already digging a tunnel out, one keystroke at a time. By the time I turned 18, the walls of that house had taught me one lesson. Silence was my greatest weapon. Every cheer for Gregory, every snide comment from Andrea, every eye roll from Mom only fueled me further. They thought ignoring me would keep me small, but all it did was make me focused. While Gregory was off chasing online tournaments, and Andrea was out bragging about her brother's upcoming stardom, I was teaching myself to build worlds out of code. I won a scholarship to Chicago State University, majoring in computer science. The day the acceptance letter arrived, Mom barely looked up from her phone. "That's nice," she said flatly. "But don't forget to help your brother move his gaming rig this weekend." I didn't argue. I didn't even sigh. I just packed my things and left that house for good. University became my new sanctuary. Between classes, I worked part-time at a small tech firm downtown, entering client data, fixing bugs, anything they'd let me do. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every paycheck went straight into savings. Every skill I learned became a weapon I'd one day use to rewrite my life. During those years, I built my first real project. A task management app for small business owners. Nothing fancy, just clean practical code that worked. I tested it on my beat-up laptop in the corner of a shared dorm room, while other students partied down the hall. My app didn't crash once. It ran perfectly. By graduation, that same simple app had caught the attention of a few local business owners. A florist, a deli owner, even a small bookstore that needed help tracking stock. I charged almost nothing. I just wanted proof it worked. Within a year, word spread through the neighborhood, then the city, then the suburbs. While my family still thought I was barely getting by, I was quietly signing contracts worth more than Mom's annual salary. I kept the same rusty car, the same worn clothes, the same quiet smile. I wanted them to underestimate me. Each deposit in my bank account was a small spark in the fire I'd been building since childhood. A fire that burned quietly, waiting for the right moment to light up their world. I never boasted, never hinted at what I was building. Not even Dad knew the scale of it. But I could feel it, the balance of power shifting, inch by inch. Every time my phone buzzed with a new client, I was no longer the shadow in that house. I was the storm forming just beyond their line of sight, and when the night came for them to take everything from me one last time, that storm finally broke. And none of them were ready for what I'd built behind their backs. It happened on a Saturday night. One of those family dinners that looked picture perfect from the outside, but always carried the taste of tension. Roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and forced smiles. My father fidgeted with his napkin. Andrea scrolled her phone. And Gregory, the golden son, was too busy boasting about his next live tournament to notice the air thickening around us. Mom was waiting for her cue, and when it came, she didn't waste time. She set her fork down with a deliberate clatter and said, as if issuing an executive order, "Gregory needs your room for his gaming studio. You'll move to the basement." The words didn't just hit me, they hollowed me out. That room was my sanctuary, my creative heart. It was where I'd designed my app's first prototype, where every sticky note on the wall mapped my future, where I'd spent nights turning heartbreak into logic. It wasn't just space, it was identity. I tried to stay calm. "That room's my office," I said. my tone careful, steady. Mom's eyes hardened. "If you refuse," she said, "you're choosing to walk away from this family." The threat wasn't new, but this time it didn't sting. It clarified. Andrea smirked. "Gregory's work actually means something," she sneered. "You're just typing behind a screen." Dad shifted uneasily, trying to mediate. "Barbara," he began softly, "maybe we can find another—" "One decision, Kevin," she snapped. "It's final." I looked around the table. My mother's cold certainty, my sister's petty grin, my brother's smug silence. And in that moment, I realized the truth. They had never seen me. They had only seen what I could give them, and they had taken enough. I stood slowly, the scrape of my chair slicing through the tension. "Then you've just made your choice," I said. My voice didn't shake. It carried. Gregory scoffed. "You're seriously leaving over a room?" I met his gaze and smiled faintly. "No, Greg. I'm leaving over years." Dad called my name, but I was already walking out, past the family photos of Gregory's trophies, past the door that had always been more cage than shelter. Outside, the night air hit me cold and clean. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt awake. They thought this was about a room, a piece of the house they still believed I needed. But they didn't know I'd been building something far beyond those four walls. And soon, I would make sure they saw it every single day. The next morning, while they still thought they'd won, I made a single phone call, one that would flip the balance of power forever. The next morning, sunlight streamed through my window, as if the universe wanted to witness what came next. My mother's ultimatum still echoed in my head, but it didn't hurt anymore. It energized me. I'd spent years letting them define my worth. Now I was ready to let the truth speak for itself. I picked up my phone and dialed Taylor Rivera, a real estate agent I'd quietly met months earlier. Back then, I'd told her I was just looking around, but in truth, I was planning an escape. "Taylor," I said calmly, "let's move forward with the house on Willow Street. Full cash offer. No delays." Her surprise was audible even through the phone. "All cash? Anna, that's incredible. I can have the paperwork ready by Monday." "Perfect," I replied. "Let's make it official." That house, a sleek 2-story with modern windows and a small porch, stood directly across the street from my parents. I had chosen it deliberately, not for convenience, but for symbolism. I wanted them to see, every single day, what they'd thrown away. By Sunday morning, I texted Mom, "Coffee at your place." I have an update. When I walked into their living room, the air was thick with tension and curiosity. Andrea lounged on the couch with her arms crossed. Gregory sat at the table, his phone in hand, clearly uninterested. Mom hovered near the window, already wearing that impatient frown. "So," she said, tapping her foot, "have you come to your senses about the room?" I smiled. "Not exactly. I'm moving out." Dad blinked. "Moving out?" "Yes," I said, pulling a neatly folded document from my purse. The property deed, still warm from the printer. "To the house across the street." For a second, no one spoke. Then Andrea scoffed. "You're joking." Mom's eyes narrowed. "You bought a house. With what money?" "My company's money," I said, placing the deed on the table. "You know, the company you've never asked about. The one that's been helping small businesses all over Chicago manage their inventory. The one I built while you were busy buying gaming chairs for Greg." Gregory's smirk vanished. Andrea's mouth fell open. Mom just stared, frozen, her world trying to reassemble around a truth she couldn't deny. To make sure there was no doubt, I called my colleague John Diaz on speaker. "John, could you confirm yesterday's client milestone?" "Sure." His cheerful voice filled the room. "Anna, congrats again. 25,000 active users and 6 new enterprise accounts. You've built something special." The silence that followed was absolute. I picked up the deed and smiled softly. You wanted me out. Wish granted. But now you'll see my house every morning. A reminder of what I built without your belief. They thought they'd cut me out of the family story. But soon, they'd realize I was the one rewriting it. It didn't take long for their perfect little world to start cracking. From the porch of my new home, I watched the storm build across the street. Slowly, then all at once, Gregory's golden boy reputation, the pride of the Clark family, began to crumble. The same fame they had worshipped him for became the knife that cut them open. It started with whispers online, leaked screenshots from a private betting group. Gregory and his girlfriend, Alexandra Walker, another flashy streamer, had been gambling thousands on competitive matches. What began as friendly wagers had snowballed into losses in the hundreds of thousands. Mom pretended not to see it at first. She told neighbors it was fake news, that people were just jealous of Gregory's success. But when sponsors started dropping him, one by one, reality came crashing through the front door. The sports drink brand he bragged about, gone. The gaming chair company that used to ship him free products, gone. Within days, his income vanished. And when Alexandra turned on him publicly during a live stream, it was the final blow. She called him reckless, controlling, and desperate. The video hit 500,000 views overnight. Comments poured in, mocking him, dissecting every arrogant thing he'd ever said. Gregory's followers plummeted. His name, once a brand, became a cautionary tale. From my porch, I saw him one afternoon, standing in the driveway, staring at his car, the one Mom had financed with her savings. As a tow truck hauled it away, his hands hung limply at his sides. Inside that shrinking house, chaos reigned. Mom worked double shifts at the bank to cover his debts. Andrea picked up part-time retail work, pretending she wasn't ashamed. Dad stopped going to school for days at a time. His silence, once gentle, now carried the weight of defeat. Didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I just watched, quietly, remembering every time they'd dismissed me, every time they'd said Gregory was destined for greatness. One humid afternoon, I saw them move out, box by box. The house that had once been their pride was sold off for a fraction of its worth. A new family moved in, their laughter echoing through the same windows where I once sat invisible. Mom's new life was a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the city's edge. Gregory slept on the couch. Andrea barely spoke to anyone. Dad looked smaller somehow, like the weight of years of silence had finally crushed him. I waved to them occasionally, not out of malice, but as a reminder, the empire they built on favoritism had finally collapsed, brick by brick. They had worshipped the wrong child, and as their lights went out one by one, mine burned brighter. Because the fire they tried to snuff out in me was the only thing still standing. Months passed, and the house across the street, the one they once called home, became just another address. The laughter, the lights, the noise of their certainty had all faded into silence. From my porch, I watched the new owners repaint the walls, plant flowers, and hang wind chimes on the porch rail. Their joy didn't sting. It healed something in me. Meanwhile, the Clarks had become a ghost of their former selves. Gregory's scandals left him blacklisted in the gaming world. Sponsors wouldn't touch him. Brands avoided his name. And his once loyal followers turned to ridicule. He started delivering food for cash, hiding under a hoodie when people recognized him. Andrea's life followed suit. The smugness she once wore like armor cracked. She called once, pretending to catch up, then quickly slipped into a request for money to start a new business. I deleted the voicemail before she finished. Mom's fall was the hardest to watch. Barbara Clark, the queen of the house, the woman who ruled every decision with iron certainty, was now just another exhausted face on the train. commuting to a bank job that paid half of what she once earned. I'd seen her once by accident in a grocery store line. She looked right through me, her eyes dull, her posture heavy. I didn't say hello. Dad came by once. He looked older, years older than the time that had passed. His voice was gentle, the same tone he used when he used to slip me those notes of encouragement. "I'm proud of you, Anna," he said quietly. "You did what none of us could." Then after a pause, "They're struggling. If you could help, just a little." I met his gaze, my voice calm. "I already did, for years. That was enough." He nodded slowly. There was sadness in his eyes, but also something like understanding. When he left, I closed the door softly. No anger, no guilt, just peace. A month later, I hosted my first housewarming party. My friends from the tech community came. Developers, designers, business owners, people who had believed in my app and in me. Fairy lights glowed across the porch. Laughter filled every room. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like an outsider in my own home. My colleague John raised a glass. "To Anna Clark," he said, smiling. "The woman who built her own empire. Quietly, brilliantly, and without asking anyone's permission." The room erupted in cheers. I looked around, the sound washing over me like redemption. I thought of that basement I was supposed to move into, of all the times they told me I'd never matter. And then I thought of this moment. My home, my work, my peace. They'd buried me in silence. I'd learned to make fire out of it. They tried to erase me from their story, but in the end, I became the one thing they could never ignore. The proof that sometimes the quiet ones write the loudest legacies.